Welcome back, folks. It's just been a little while, so frankly, I had a little snack, but no sleep for me. I don't know about my compatriots here, but we're back for some more tennis. We covered the men's tournaments, probably I guess just about 45 minutes ago at this point, maybe about an hour. If you missed that, you can go on Eat Sleep Tennis, find the video there and a few other places, or it should be up as a podcast just about everywhere by the time we're done this show, if it is not already. Candace, how are you? How was your break? Did you have time to play with the dog?
I did. I took the dog outside, all good to go there, played a little fetch, and I'm back.
How about you, Steve? I know you were busy doing a little bit of writing, but get anything else done during our little break there?
No, just a very quick preview that I put out. And there is an irony in the fact that I think every preview that I start with by saying it's going to be short and sharp because I'm doing something generally ends up being the longest previews I write. And I don't know why that's the case. And I need to be a better human being. Anyway.
I like that. I think we're ready. I think that really is like a good place for us to go. I have so
be a
many
better
things to
human
say
being.
I'll just skip them all. I'll just skip them all.
The only way is
just one women's tournament this week. Unfortunately, I don't know what everyone else is doing. I guess they're traveling to get ready for what's coming next. But for the women that are still in Australia, they did have to go, as Steve said, about an 8-hour drive away. I assume a short plane flight for any of them. To Adelaide. Ashley Barty, after kind of a disappointing finish to her Australian Open, has the bye. Got a wild card, which I thought was interesting. I guess she didn't decide to enter the tournament in time or whatever, but interesting. I don't know how often we get a wild card one seed, but a really tough quarter for her as a result. Collins there. Looks like we've got Swiatek down at the bottom. Steve, what do you think? What do you expect from Barty here, coming off a pretty rough finish to her Australian Open?
Yeah, look, it wasn't the best finish from her. This, for some of the bigger players who probably made the quarterfinals and beyond of the Australian Open, then this is kind of that similar letdown spot to probably what we saw from some of those players in that Phillip Island Trophy who were backing up quickly last week. But look, she is very, very short, and I don't think I'm as keen on her in the outright markets when you look at the price and what's involved. I think when you look at this section, I mean, a lot of the qualifiers, look, it's not the strongest qualifying field, but it has been dominated by Australians who have been able to cause a couple of upsets in the first leg here. They're still obviously to play one more round, so there's a few interesting names there that might jump in. But I don't mind Swiatek, I think, here. I think Iga looks, she played pretty well, in Melbourne, lost to Halep in 3 sets. I think, she matches up relatively well here in this section, against either, a qualifier first up and then Stosur or a qualifier in the second round. I think we should be seeing her in the final 8 at least.
How about you, Candace? How do you see this section, or this quarter, of the draw playing out?
I see Barty making it through. The level that we saw from her in Melbourne obviously wasn't good enough to win, but it wasn't terrible either. I agree this is a tricky little section, but I do think that if she plays to the level we just saw from her, that she should be able to see through. I'm very interested in that Zhang Collins match first round. I'd be interested to be playing Zhang there. She had one of the longer gaps of some of these players when it came to the COVID time period and who was playing at the end of 2020 and who wasn't. And she's gotten to that point now where she's been able to play a little bit of tennis here these first couple months. So I'm anticipating an improvement to come from her at some point, and I wonder if it winds up coming up here. So more than anything, I'm intrigued by that first round match, playing Zhang over Collins, but a very interesting kind of little section here with Barty, Stosur, and Swiatek.
It is. I think this will be honestly the toughest part of Barty's draw, even though she has a bye. We'll get to some of the other quarters here, but I think this is probably the roughest part of her path. I do expect her to play well. She is the defending champion. And as I mentioned, she came in here as a wild card, and I think that was maybe because she was maybe a little upset about how she played, and I think wants to make sure that she gets to keep these points and continues to get to play well before the WTA progresses. Any other thoughts from you guys on this quarter before we jump into the second?
No, I think, I did make that comment on the qualifiers before, and I guess there is a big range, I think, in the qualifiers that, there are players that could get through like Coco Gauff, Yuvan and McNally, but also, some of the others, perhaps aren't as strong, I guess, final round qualifying matches. So it will be interesting to see, particularly where, if Coco were to get through, where she would fall. So there are a couple of spots there that may shake things up a little bit. But it's worth mentioning that, a little bit, it will come down a little bit to where some of these qualifiers are placed, where maybe some of the better outright value lies a little bit down the track.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good thing to keep an eye on. In this particular spot, it's nice for Barty that she's away from those. But let's jump into the second quarter. Elise Mertens with the bye there. Wang Jiang, our seed there in the bottom. Some fun names here in the middle. This could be kind of a competitive quarter, but I think Mertens kind of takes the day despite some of the more interesting matches we'll see, day to day. What do you see here, Candace?
I mean, Mertens is definitely the name that sticks out in this group. I don't totally mind Teichmann here. I think the draw for her there on that bottom portion is decently appealing with Mladenovic first and then the winner of Vong and Gadecki. Her then against Mertens, they've gone back and forth in the past. So if you're looking at it from a price perspective, I'd probably just lean a little bit more towards Teichmann in this portion. But obviously from a name recognition standpoint, Mertens jumps off. But I think Mertens, despite having the bye, that second round match could be really tough, whether it's Garcia or Sevastova. That's not an easy match there to have right off the bat. So she almost looks to me as somebody who either she's going to make it all the way through out of this quarter as Mertens, or she's going to lose right off the bat there.
Steven, what do you see here?
I think, well, just first of all, just a little shout out to one of the friends of the show, Zampa. I'm just going to put this up here for him, that Gadecki title watch is on. She was able to beat Sophia Kenin last week, albeit with, I think I don't know if her appendix had burst yet or something was going on there. She's obviously been a little bit unwell since. But look, again, this is making it really tricky for me to continue my resolutions around Mertens and outrights. I think this is a really favourable spot for her, particularly in this draw. Mladenovic did beat Zachary in Melbourne and did show some decent patches. And look, Teichmann didn't really convince me over her performances over the last couple of weeks. So I'm not as sold, I think, on that form there. But yeah, I think if you had to pick, first round bye and that second round matchup, it's hard to go past Mertens, who looked pretty good in Melbourne overall, and then also backed up and won the women's doubles title.
It makes a lot of sense. I like Teichmann in the first round. I like Gadecki in the first round, and they're very interesting players. I actually even have Garcia here. I didn't realize I bet all three of these first round matches here, but Mertens is kind of head and shoulders above anybody besides maybe Garcia, who's redlining. And I'm not going to count on that. I think Mertens is in pretty solid shape here to advance. She's plus 450 or 4.5 to 1 to win the tournament. I don't know how I feel about all that, but I think she advances through this quarter, which I think will have some interesting names, but a predictable outcome.
And I think that's the thing with a couple of these players. If you look at their floor and their ceiling, that a couple of these players do have very high ceilings at their best. We just don't see it enough. And I think if you had to pinpoint a player out of here that you had to, if you were putting your life on it, to get out of this section, you'd be siding probably with Mertens.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. Anything else, Candace, for you to add before we jump to the third?
Nope.
We've got Petra Martic there at the top, Jo Konta at the bottom. She's got the bye, but those are our two seeds. Again, 3 of those qualifiers. So I think this could be a really interesting quarter once it starts to shake out. Candace, what do you see here?
Petra Martic, obviously going against a qualifier to begin things and then a qualifier after that. We'll see who those wind up being. But I think that anytime you have a quarter that the highest seed in it is Jo Konta, that is not a negative, certainly at this stage as well. So I look for Martic to make it through this. This is a gift at this level, to be frank with you, from a draw perspective.
Yeah, if the qualifiers shake out the right way, it could be nice for Martic, but I'm a little worried. Like Steve mentioned, there could be a couple names in there that might be tricky. How do you feel, Steve, about the third?
Yeah, look, I agree. And it is hard to kind of formulate too much of an opinion here because, Martic could be in a pocket of 4 players with, Goff, McNally, and, maybe even a Samsonova, or it could be, Brengel, McHale, and Sharma. So there is a big difference there. I'm leaning towards, and look, I think, Konta hasn't showed a lot over the last couple of weeks. She did pull out last week and is focusing on Adelaide. If you had to go on recent form, it's probably making a case of either Rogers or Kudermetova. That does make it tricky, though, because they are playing each other in the first round. So it's almost kind of a pick a side and maybe pick the value there. But yeah, I think that's probably the most competitive of the first round matches. But I just haven't seen enough from Martic to be keen.
It would be nice to back Petri here, but again, it's kind of the uncertainty there, those qualifiers. I agree with what you said, Steve. That Rogers-Kudermetova match, the winner there, I think has a nice chance to advance. And you'll see it just a little bit later. I kind of picked the winner of that match, and I see some value on her price because happy to fade Konta here. And again, with all kind of the question marks, not only given who might be there, but given Martic's form, I think the winner of that Rogers-Kudermetova match could be some value. Anything else, guys, before we jump to the last quarter?
No, let's head on.
There at the top. Bencic at the bottom. She's got the bye. Tomljanovic there. I thought she was Australian, Steve. What happened?
She is. We go through this every time. It's the wrong flag. Yeah. We need to come up with our own graphics, I think. This is what we need to make up out of this. But at least it's the right players.
Yelled our intern. So I'll start with you then, Steve. How do you see this shaking out?
Look, I think Belinda Bencic is probably grateful for the bye and, straight through the second round and some points here. It is an interesting one. This is the section that I would love to attack if we get the right qualifier in that middle portion there. I'm hoping for someone along the lines of a Coco or, maybe even a Samsonova or someone along those lines to be able to win through and find their way into this section, because I think then it becomes attackable. Putintseva and Siegmund, yes, they can be damaging and they can be a threat, but one of them will be knocked out in round one because they're facing each other. I don't think Bencic is playing well enough to justify her outright price. Tomljanovic, you could make it maybe a case for. She did look pretty good in Melbourne, but threw away that chance against Simona Halep. Blinkova hasn't looked consistent enough lately, so again, it's easy. I would hope to get a really good qualifier into that spot, because I think that's probably the better path there to face Blinkova first up and then Bencic, and have already had a couple of wins under your belt, I think is a big step in the right direction. So I'm keenly watching to see who ends up there. But I think of those players there, you can maybe make a case for Tomljanovic, but it's tricky.
Yeah, Tomljanovic is a player I like match to match, but it seems to be hard for her to put the consistency together for an entire week. I think Putintseva is definitely an attackable seed, so I think the winner of that Goff-Yuvan match, which you seem to be decided on it being Coco. I think that'll be a long match. I'm curious to see, but whoever wins that, I think will be interesting. Candace, what do you see here in the fourth?
Very similar thoughts to you guys. Certainly staying far away from Belinda Bencic, and I'm very interested in who Tomljanovic winds up playing first round, because I was taken with some of what we saw from her down in Melbourne. We'll see what she's able to do from that or carry from that. But if she's against a high profile enough player here first round from the qualifiers, if it was someone like a Coco, I'd be keen to take her against her. Will she you talked about not maintaining that consistency for a tournament. She struggles to maintain that consistency for a match. But the good portions of what we've seen from her in recent matches have been very good. She strikes me, Tomljanovic, as a player who, at some point this year, she's really going to go on a run, because, she's had so many matches now against higher profile players where the victory's been right there in her sights, and she's just kind of caved it away. And a lot of times for players like that, it just takes one. You got to get over that hump. And once you do, then that mental aspect is so much easier. It's so much easier to do something when you've done it. And getting over that hump is the hard part. And I think she's experiencing some of that right now. But first round, if it's the right player, I would certainly be keen to be playing her from there. But aside from that, just a quarter where I'd be looking to stay away from Bencic and kind of look more towards the other portions of the draw as far as outrights are concerned.
It is a shame that Bencic isn't in her best form and not feeling well. This is just a great spot in the draw for her. If this was 2019 when she started to find some form and some health, I think I would be all over her. She'd probably, frankly, be my pick to win this tournament. But she is not, and we'll get to that maybe in just a second. Any other thoughts from you guys before we get into our picks to win, our value thoughts, and people to avoid?
All right, can we just do you like to lead us off with your ace?
Indeed, and I'll be circling back to talk about her a little bit more kind of at the end, maybe to give away kind of what my final segment will be. Ashley Barty is my pick to win this tournament. I think she is head and shoulders the best player in this field. I know that her first couple matches, which, even after the bye will be second and third round matches, are not ideal. But Collins is a player that she can beat. She has plenty of variety and will be able to handle her. Swiatek is a great young player, but these are not the ideal conditions for her. Barty, again, is the defending champion and won pretty comfortably. I can't remember if she didn't drop a set, but it was pretty close to not dropping a set in her win last year. So I think after, again, a disappointing performance, she will be laser focused here to kind of run through this tournament. And as I start to look at the draw, as she gets past those first two matches, it may not be as difficult as the names indicate. She'll have a chance to run through this field.
Candice, anything to add? I feel like you might be on a similar page to Alex here.
I'm on the same. I didn't want to be. I really wanted to beat Ash Barty, but couldn't do it with the draw that she has. And you have to anticipate there's going to be so much less pressure for her in this tournament than she would have been dealing with just a couple of weeks ago. So grudgingly going with Ash Barty.
And look, of course, we can't all agree on everything too much. We did that with Benoit Paire on the last episode. So we've reached our quota for the week. I've actually gone with Iga Swiatek. I'm thinking this might be a slight letdown spot for Ash. The last photos we saw of her was on the beers with Dylan Alcott and Pat Rafter, I think after Alcott won his title the other day. So I'm not gonna go onto that one, Alex. So look, I think there is a spot here that is a little bit attackable from an outright perspective with Swiatek. Yes, Ash is the defending champion Adelaide, but last time this was the week before the Australian Open. Now it's the week after, so slightly different situation here. And it looks like a little bit of a letdown spot for her with that drop back to this level from a post Grand Slam in which she was disappointed at the end. Alrighty, we'll move on to our value picks. Now we might start. We'll go to Candice first, and then we'll do Alex and myself because there's a bit of a we're up against each other here in this one. So Candice, we'll start with you. Who's your value pick?
Oh my gosh, I've not forgotten. I get to go first. I never thought this day would come. I'm going with Petra Martic. I understand that there's a bit of uncertainty with her level at this stage. We just haven't seen some of these players play a lot of tennis, let alone a lot of good tennis. But, I was a little bit encouraged by what we saw from her towards the end of the tournament over for the Phillip Island Trophy, and we'll see if she's able to back it up here. Obviously, we know how she is at her best, but I think more than anything, this is a draw that has a little bit of room for attacking should the qualifiers come up and not be too crazy. I'm not concerned by the bottom portion of that draw to any large degree. So I'm going to be going with Petra Martic here for my value play.
And Alex, who have you gone for?
I will say I like that, Candice. I mean, you're buying as low as about as you can on Martic, who might actually have a nice spot here. But as I alluded to earlier, I think the winner of that Rogers-Kudermetova match is in a really nice spot, and I think Kudermetova is going to win. Rogers had a couple nice performances here. We saw her in Yarra Valley. Sorry, I ruined the pronunciation there, Steve, but just an attempt to get you riled up when you go next here. But as you start to look through some of the people that Rogers played and beat, yes, she has only lost to Ashley Barty, which is generally a good thing, but she beat Farrow, she beat Peterson in kind of her first match back after a while. Martic in less than great form, Jones, Danilovic, Kontaveit, who's less than consistent. I don't know if I'm really as impressed with some of these Rogers wins as maybe the market is. So I was happy to grab Kudermetova, not only at plus money or greater than 2.0, if you will, in that first round match. I also think she's value here in the outright markets.
And I have gone with a similar train of thought, except flipping this first round opponent. So I've gone with Shelby Rogers. I think she looked solid across the swing in Melbourne. I guess it's trying to weigh up is the 3 weeks in Melbourne, and how does that compare to that lead up, that Abu Dhabi form? I think that brings in Kudermetova. So it does make it a little bit trickier. And I do think, and I agree with Alex, that I think whoever wins this particular match is going to go on a run. It's just about which kind of player you side with at the start of the tournament. Now, we will move.
Well, we're in agreement on the attackable portion of the draw.
Correct. We've all gone into the same.
Yeah, if there's a quarter to win price.
Are there any players I guess Joe Kant is the only player we even know of in that quarter.
Yeah. So, and I think, again, we're picking the best we can with the draw as it lies at the moment with 7 qualifiers to be inserted. But I think that's the best spot to attack at the moment. We'll move on to the unforced errors. So who are we looking to maybe avoid in this particular tournament, Alex?
It's kind of an off week here for Belinda Bencic. I know that she's here. She's got the bye. She's kind of sort of maybe hopefully working herself into some shape here, but I'm kind of giving her a pass this week. I think this is a tough spot for her coming off the Australian Open. Had some days here to get better, but still doesn't look to be herself. So kind of giving her a pass until further notice.
Are you agreeing with that, Candace?
Yes, I am. I just don't think she's the player that we saw her to be even just a couple of years ago. Certainly looking in another direction. Alex kind of said it.
Yeah, and I think with that, and when you look at her, she does fall along the same lines as some of those other players that I think she's not presenting as value prices at the moment. And yes, she may run through this tournament and win, but personally, I'm not going to be too disappointed if I miss and it could take 4, 5, 6 tournaments for her to go on that genuine run. I'm happy to sit it out for now. I'm not going to feel bad if she wins the tournament that what might have been. I think it's a good player at the moment to just kind of watch and keep an eye on, but maybe if she puts together a couple of poor weeks in a row, try and find that right spot to kind of jump back in and get involved inside with her, because I think she just needs a lot of time on court, because we didn't see her, outside of, I think she lost to Kovanic on clay, was it, I think, end of last year, and then just kind of pulled the pin on the rest of the year. So I think she just needs the time on court. My unforced error, and I watched her play live against Coco Gauff in the lead-up tournament to the Australian Open. I've gone for Jill Teichmann. I'm a little bit worried about her in that I think she played really well in was it Lexington or one of those lead-up tournaments to the US Open, and put together some decent form, I think, through there. And I think I got a little bit too high on her in terms of what her level was, I guess, on hard courts. And I'm a little bit worried here. I think, based on what I saw, she wasn't timing the ball really well in Melbourne. And basically her entire game is based around her movement and her timing and ability to counterpunch. I'm just a little bit worried about her in this section of the draw and with what lies ahead for her, that I'm just not sure. And I don't know if this is me also not hoping that she doesn't win significant tournaments in the next part, but I'm really excited to see her on the clay, I think, in the months ahead. And I'm just wondering if maybe we're not seeing her best at the moment. And look, if she were to lose early in a couple of these tournaments, I'd be really keen to hopefully see her prices balloon out on some of those smaller clay tournaments in the lead up to Roland Garros.
Would love that.
Now, Alex, who is your overvalued player?
I've talked about her earlier. She, in fact, is my pick to win the tournament, but I don't understand how anyone with this draw at a WTA tournament should be about 2.5 to 1 odds to win this tournament. Yes, she has a bye, but at the small field, you start to look at her draw. Collins could maybe give her some trouble. Swiatek, as much as I said, these aren't ideal conditions for her, has the variety to hang with Barty, has the problem solving and the creativity to deal with whatever's going to happen in that match. And then if she does get to the final, maybe Bencic is playing well and she actually gets through there. Maybe Martic kind of puts it together and is playing well, or even somebody like Kudermetova or Rogers is there who's going to be challenging for her. I think that as much as I do think she wins this tournament, I would not bet it given the price offered.
Yeah, that seems fair enough. Candace, who's your overvalued player?
Candace is overvalued.
Much better.
It's the same as my unforced error. It's going to be Belinda Bencic, just because her odds are still short. I think that she's been really protected in books from what we've seen, just because of that probably uncertainty of what she's going to be showing. And, you're anticipating that she's going to turn it on at some point. You just don't know when that's going to be. So I'm betting against it being this tournament or this soon into her comeback run, I suppose. When you look at the odds for someone like Swiatek, who has a very legitimate, good chance of winning the tournament, and Bencic is sitting there at, a little bit over double the odds, that still is too short for me from what we've seen from her thus far.
Yeah. And I think, following along these kind of players that look a little bit short, I'm agreeing with Alex here as well, with Ash Barty as being my pick. Too short the week after a Grand Slam. Probably any other time in the year, maybe if there wasn't, such a letdown spot here, you could maybe make a case, but part of my appeal of Swiatek at her price in this market is that I think that Barty is too short, and I don't think we're going to see, Barty is about to embark on her first international travel and set up a base in Europe. I think it is to actually travel and take part in this season more so than she did last year. So I'm seeing this as, although she is the defending champion, it is a little bit more of an afterthought than was probably first predicted, I guess, in this tournament and how it's popping up. So I'm happy to go against her. I mean, she might win, but as Alex said, this price is too short, I think, to get involved in, given its position in the calendar.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. All right, guys, anything else we want to talk about here before we wrap up the women's portion of this week's show?
No,
I think we're all done. I guess we've done the tennis part. I'm going to go and do the eating part, and you guys are probably soon to be doing the sleeping part.
Well, maybe me first. Candace should hopefully.
I'm about to do the working part.
I know, she's got to do the working part. That's real sad. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Again, reach out to us any way you can. Mentioned all the good stuff you could do at the end of the men's show. But, feel free to DM us. Feel free to reach out to any of us. We would love to know what you think of the show, what we're doing well, what we could be doing better, what you like, what you want us to stop doing. All that stuff is really great. And, we love talking about tennis. So if you have any thoughts or questions, we'd be happy to answer. And until just about a few days from now, we should be back with some Challenger talk, I think. But until next time, thanks for watching.